Hi guys, Olive here today for a little bit of a different type of video than I normally do. In today's video, I'm joined once again by my lovely husband, Tony.
Hey.
I was able to convince him to come back, but for a very specific reason.
It didn't take much convincing, to be honest.
No, because of what we're talking about in today's video. I will warn you up front, this is going to be very niche, and this is basically an excuse for us to spend time together.
Sorry.
But I think for certain people this will have an appeal. Tony and I just recently listened to an audiobook together. We listened to it separately, but kind of at the same time, if that makes sense. But when I was going through my emails recently, I saw a newsletter from Audible, and I saw that one of their Audible originals that they're doing now, similar to how Amazon is making their own shows, Audible is commissioning their own audiobooks. There was one for Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist, which is a show that Tony and I are both obsessed with. You were obsessed with it back in the day.
I have very fond memories of staying inside during the summer and just watching endless marathons of Dr. Katz. I was probably way too young to understand most of it, but that's what I did.
Since we've been together, you have introduced me to Dr. Katz, and that's been one of many different pieces of media that we have bonded over. And when I saw that there was an audiobook for Dr. Katz, that they were bringing it back with all new comedians and all new sketches, I knew that I had to buy it, and we both had to listen to it. So we both have now, so I thought we would sit down and talk about the show a little bit, for anyone who's not seen it, which I'm assuming is most of you. But also for any Dr. Katz fans who might be interested in this audiobook.
Willing to bet there's at least one of you, if not maybe,
maybe two.
1.5. I don't know.
I hope there are some other people who really like Dr. Katz, or if we can convince you to give Dr. Katz a try. So the basic concept of the show, Tony, would you like to take this since you're our expert here?
Yeah, sure. The basic concept of the show is it follows Jonathan Katz, that's the actor who takes on the main role. He's a therapist who lives in New York City. His slacker son, Ben, lives with him.
Man-child.
Yeah, I think he's about maybe 23, 24, has no job, literally does nothing all day.
Yeah.
And Dr. Katz's clients are essentially comedians, stand-up comedians. So the show is a mix-up of John Katz and Ben's interactions along with other people he works with. Laura, receptionist who's very, how would you describe her?
Standoffish.
Standoffish.
Lazy, doesn't want to be there, is not afraid to let you know she doesn't want to be there. We should say that Jonathan Katz, and that's his name in the show as well, his son, Ben, is played by H. John Benjamin, a very young H. John Benjamin, who's the voice of Archer and Bob from Bob's Burgers, who's probably our favorite voice actor.
Yeah.
He's funny just by existing. That is who plays Ben. And then most of the comedians who are on the show, they're playing themselves, and it's a lot of names that you will have heard of. Younger versions of comedians that you still know today, so a very young Jon Stewart. We were just watching a clip with Rodney Dangerfield's. Bob Saget is on the audiobook.
Yeah.
John Hamm from Mad Men, who's been getting more into comedy.
If you watch the episodes from the 90s, you get a really wide spectrum of
who was big in comedy.
Who was big in comedy at the time. And actually, I would say a lot of comedians got their big break and start just from being on Dr. Katz. From what I remember at the time and from what I've read, if you were able to land a slot on Dr. Katz as a stand-up comedian, that was a sign that you were doing very, very well.
That's so cool. I had no idea. You see, Tony knows a lot more about the show, like
I think there were about
the actual show than I do.
I think 6 seasons. It aired in 95, 96, and then it went off the air in like 2001. 2000, because then the next show they did after that, Home Movies, was like a year or two later. Yeah,
if you've been around my channel for a little while, you may have heard me mention Home Movies, which is kind of like, I don't know, kind of like the next logical step for the people who were involved in Dr. Katz. And it started out like, if you've ever seen the show Dr. Katz, or if you go on to watch some of the clips that we're going to put down below for you, we hope you really go check those out. But it was made with what's called Squiggle vision. So all the lines are blurred and they're moving as you're watching, so it's not a fixed, stagnant image. Like, it almost has a life of its own. Is that how you would describe it?
I would also point out that in terms of like frame-to-frame animation, it's very limited. Like, I would say most frames, there's not a whole lot of like frame movement. It's usually just a drawing and then the lines are squiggling.
Yeah, they're kind of doing this.
I remember, as a kid, I found that just really fascinating and really interesting to watch.
I could see how that would appeal to a kid.
And in a way, it's kind of interesting because it's a trade-off for not a whole lot of frame movement happening, but there's still movement.
Yeah.
So it
guess keeps it visually interesting, even though not a whole lot is happening.
Right. Yeah. You're still intrigued by what's happening, and the frames are changing enough where it's not like just the same frame and it's just squiggling for like a minute. It changes enough where it's still pretty dynamic and interesting. I don't know. It never really took off. Season 1 of Home Movies, the show after Dr. Katz, did it, and after that they switched to, I believe, animating in Flash for the remaining 3 seasons. So
that fit the show a lot better.
I agree. I think Squiggle Vision was something that really only worked for Dr. Katz, and I would actually say that the show didn't necessarily need animation, which I think is one point personally that I felt about the audiobook that worked really well, is the format of Dr. Katz is such that these comedians come in and it's kind of a spectrum. Either comedians come in and they do material, they do their stand-up material, and they kind of just have a back and forth with Dr. Katz, or it's more of a casual improv kind of thing where they interject bits of their stand-up here and there. Mm-hmm. And I found that you don't really need the animation to get a whole lot out of it. In fact, one of the thoughts I had from listening to this was they could easily do like a weekly or bi-weekly podcast or something.
We talked about that.
Yeah, you could easily do this and keep doing new Dr. Katz material.
It would be really easy to bring in comedians on a weekly basis.
Oh, yeah.
To have these conversations, especially because, and this was something that sort of worked in the audiobook, but it is one of the negative points that I did want to mention in this discussion with you, is that sometimes you can really tell that they filmed this separately. The audio files sometimes are very different between Dr. Katz and the patient, so you can just audibly hear that it's less of a conversation between the two of them, but some of them are perfect. Mm-hmm. And some of them you can actually tell, like, they're actually talking. Yeah. And it's not, okay, this is what I'm going to say, this is what you're going to say, record them separately, then put them together, splice them together.
I would also say the sound quality part of it plays into it, where I immediately picked up, just because I'm a tech nerd, that I could hear that, oh, that's definitely a Skype conversation. Oh, that's definitely they were in the same room. Like, you could just...
It pulls you out of it a little bit.
It pulls you out of it a little bit. Yeah, I could hear the audio artifacts and stuff. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
Not everyone is going to have an ear for that.
Yeah, I know. That's a very specific me problem.
And I probably only noticed the audio quality as much as I did because I edit these videos that I put up here for you. It's all me. So I can hear the very subtle differences. But if you don't have an ear for that and, like, you can't hear the difference, it's not going to bother you. But that is present.
Also, there's a lot more to it than just the therapy sessions between Dr. Katz and the patients.
The patients.
Yeah, the patients.
The comedians.
You get a lot of dynamics between Dr. Katz and Laura. You get a lot of... Sometimes Ben will just call Laura incessantly because he
has a crush on her.
He has a crush on her.
And like everything else, she just wants nothing to do with it.
It's like... it's a joke that never gets old. But it's the same joke throughout the whole show. All 6 seasons.
Well, it becomes more about the characters, like the character relationships.
Yes.
The dynamic that Jonathan Katz and his son...
Oh, it's so good.
Ben, they named all the characters after the actors themselves. And the only exception to that rule is H. John Benjamin, because his name is also John. Yeah. So you can't have John Katz and H. John Benjamin. They call him John. So he goes by Ben. Their dynamic is absolutely hilarious, but it becomes kind of like an Arrested Development thing where, like, the character in of itself is hysterically funny. And then the different characters vibing off of each other and the running jokes of how the whole joke is that Ben is lazy and doesn't leave the house. He doesn't want to work. He doesn't even really want to move.
Which, let me say, it becomes even creepier in the audio, but because by this point, weird. Dr. Katz is like, he's 71.
Yeah.
Which means Ben is like pushing 40.
And he sounds older in the audiobook too.
And so there's he's still living at home in the audiobook, what a shock. And so their conversations take on a whole different perspective, at least for me they did. There's this undercurrent of, oh my god, this is really weird. It's still funny.
There's an undercurrent of, like, the question that Jonathan Katz, like, you can feel him having. And the question that you have as a listener is, you're still doing this stuff?
In fact, one of the conversations they have in the audiobook is Ben talking to Dr. Katz about when he's going to move out.
You need to rephrase that because it sounds like Ben is going to move out. But no, the whole conversation is Ben talking to his dad about, I think it's time for you to move out. And then the whole conversation, they kind of spin themselves into the thing of Ben is slowly realizing, oh, then there's not someone around who's going to do everything for me.
Yeah,
he's like, no, actually, please don't move out.
He's like, well, what are you going to do about dinner, Ben? Well, I figured you would just come around and make it anyway.
So Ben wants John to move out, but just like down the street. So he can still come over and do everything for him.
You become really used to what the dynamic is, to the point where you get a general idea of what the conversation is going to be, and you know what beats they're going to hit. And they're always funny.
Yeah. It's a cozy thing. And I was going to say that about the Squiggle Vision thing. Of like the slow movement of it's not doing much. It gives you it's a comforting show. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's fun to watch.
It's like a comedic hug.
The shows aren't scripted from what I understand. They just have it's almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm, the way they do that, in that they have a general idea of what the plots are going to be, and they just improvise scene to scene. Yeah. And they hit the beats and they just kind of navigate it that way. And
the relationships between the actors are such that they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, they just... Oh, my God. They have such good chemistry with one another, and...
They do.
They know how to improv really well.
Which characters translate best to the audiobook? Jonathan Katz, I feel like, is exactly the same, which is amazing considering his age. That he is equally as sharp, just as present. His voice is... just the same.
Also worth mentioning is Jonathan Katz, the actor, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1995-96, which is right when Dr. Katz, professional therapist, took off.
He had to give up.
Yeah, he had to give up stage acting
for voice acting. H. Jon Benjamin, as we said, it's a little bit different because his voice is audibly different. He was very, very young.
This was his first major voice acting gig, I think.
That's crazy.
And also from his memoir, he mentions that the audition was in a pantry, which I could see that happening, honestly. Yeah.
But he does sound a whole lot older, and you can kind of tell because H. Jon Benjamin is much more in demand. Like, he's the star of 2 really, really big animated series right now. They're way more sporadic than they are on the actual TV show. He's not as much of a presence. But who is more of a presence is Laura, the receptionist. And they actually bring in her sister, Erica.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Their dynamic is hilarious. Laura is even snarkier. Laura has her own sketches more than she does in the show. She is a lot more of a presence in the audiobook, and the audiobook is so much richer for it. There's a whole sketch with her that she does a DNA test, and she finds out that she's Dutch and wants to go home.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. Like, if we were to explain the plot lines of a lot of the Dr. Katz episodes, like, it would seem really boring.
They sound juvenile, and there's no way that... one episode is Dr. Katz can't find his day planner.
We were just watching
this one, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, he misplaces his day planner, which is where he puts all of his appointments and thoughts about his patients and everything. And he has Ben go on a wild goose chase for it, but Ben is lazy, so he doesn't really want to look.
It's a joke that it's one joke.
Yeah.
But it's just continuously funny.
But I think what makes it really funny is the way they say things, which is what makes this so easily translatable to an audiobook or a podcast. Please do a podcast.
Yeah, they could, honestly, they seriously should do that.
Just when Ben and John are playing Guess Who, Ben is sitting with his back to some sort of reflective surface, and
TV.
John... Oh, a TV, yeah. And John is sitting across from him, and he can see who the guy is, and he just goes straight for the win and just guesses who it is.
Ben gets so mad.
And he does, and it's the tenor of his voice. He's like, because doesn't John say, like, you want to play it?
You want to play it? And Ben's like, no.
No.
And the best part is the beginning of that scene. Jonathan Katz finds Guess Who, and he's like, oh, you want to play this? You remember this? And then as he's setting it up, Ben goes, I have a vague memory of not liking this game.
Oh, so it's kind
which I think foreshadows that this is something that he's always done.
He just cheats, I guess. I really, really urge you to watch some of the clips that we're going to put down below. If we can find some of the specific ones that we mentioned in this video, so you can get an idea of what we're talking about. It is so funny. But let's go back to talking about Jonathan Katz and his relationship with his patients, because that is kind of what provides like the backbone to the show.
Yeah, it's very much the core of the appeal of the show. In terms of the audiobook, I would say that it is the core thing of the audiobook, whereas the show was more of a...
About the relationships.
It was more of a mixture. It was pretty
Yeah.
even. That was one thing I missed from the audiobook was not that many interactions with Ben.
Mm-hmm. Or his friends from the bar, because Jonathan Katz frequents this bar.
That.
He's friends with the bartender
Stanley
and then another regular.
And Julie.
Yes.
Stanley and Julie.
That's completely absent.
Yeah, that's totally absent.
I don't know how they would make that work unless you had some sort of background of like clanging.
I was thinking about that.
That is one thing I should probably say about the audiobook. Like, you don't have to have watched the show.
No,
it's funny by
not.
itself.
I would say it might be a good entry point. They talk about some topical things. They talk about current events, so you have more of a reference point. Whereas if you go back and watch some stuff from the 90s, they're going to be throwing out some references to things. I mean, I watch it and I'm just like, oh, I don't remember that.
Do you feel as though the audiobook is a natural extension of the show?
Oh, absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah, the format is such that it's just so easily translatable to
just straight audio.
To just straight audio.
Some things are lost, but some things are gained.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to have more people on because they can record separately, which we said is obvious sometimes that they are. But I do want to mention, because I did not know this about the audiobook going in, the final 2 hours are stand-up sketches. So it's actually Jonathan Katz in a theater, and you have Laura's voice coming in over the intercom, like, somebody is here. And then they actually come on stage and have a conversation with him.
Some of them are really good. Some of them, You don't get... And I put it down to... Not that they're necessarily bad, but you don't get that ability to edit stuff, and have it be punchy. You have a very contained set of jokes and then transition to another one, where this one is just 10 minutes straight of them just talking.
In some cases that works really well. And in others it just kind of doesn't work. Like, because they're on stage together, they need to vibe. Mm-hmm. And if they don't vibe, it's just not as clear. Funny. But I do want to also say the style of humor, because it's not going to be everybody's style of humor. It's definitely ours. It is quiet, understated, very dry.
It's so dry, but that is what I love about it.
Yeah, they'll say things like completely deadpan.
So many one-liners.
It's a lot of situational comedy, but it's like you need to be standing outside and seeing the whole picture. Like, Ben is funny because of the recurring jokes of him being lazy. Like, the individual things he says are funny in that grander context. So it honestly takes someone who appreciates dry humor, but also likes that kind of thing, where the instant is funny, but what's funnier is the whole picture. And that's why we love Arrested Development so much. Because it's moment to moment it's funny, but the whole picture is the funniest thing.
It's the continuity.
Yeah.
And how everything builds on everything.
And how it rewards you for the time you invest in it. But overall, I thought it was a really great experience. Honestly, if they were ever to do another one, I would hope that they wouldn't do the stand-up bits at the end.
No, it's so much stronger when you've got in-studio stuff and you've got Final Cut and you have more control over...
It almost felt wrong to hear people laughing at the jokes.
Yeah, because the show is very much about being dry and understated and having essentially what is the equivalent of a laugh track.
Yeah.
Felt really...
It didn't fit.
It didn't fit.
It didn't fit it. No, because that's just not the style of show it is. And because it is a therapist's office, like, you don't expect anyone else to be there.
Yeah, it breaks the illusion a bit.
Watching, because so it needs to be that cozy, intimate relationship. And that is one thing that's really present in the show and on the audiobook, are those intimate relationships. Mm-hmm. Both between all the characters that you know, and then also between Dr. Katz and his patient. Mm-hmm. So it may be clear by now that this is something that we highly recommend. Mm-hmm. I'm going to put a link down in the description box below to the Audible page for this if you want to go and purchase it. It is an Audible original, so it's only available on Audible. Mm-hmm. If you have an Audible subscription, you can use a credit toward it, or you can choose to purchase it. I highly, highly recommend it. It has a lot of re-listening potential. Like, I know I'm going to download this and just go back and listen to
I already want to re-listen to certain things.
And, like, you can kind of pick your favorites. That's what's nice about this audiobook, actually, is because they're all in the different tracks. It's not like a full Dr. Katz episode where, like, if you just wanted this little bit or just this comedian sketch, you would have to watch the whole episode to get to it.
It's really well paced and broken up. Like, each chapter is like 11, 12 minutes, maybe 15 minutes.
With the exception of those 2 hour-long things at the end.
Another reason it didn't work.
Yeah, it just didn't fit it.
Didn't fit having 15-minute chunks and throwing an hour at you. Like
2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
It was just too much. And I hate to say, like, I didn't hate it. So it's weird for me to say, like, I don't want it there, because I would still listen to it again, but
I would just rather know what I was getting into.
I had no idea it was coming, and then I started hearing like an audience. I'm like, who are all you people? But I will link that down below. You can go listen to a sample. Highly recommend you pick it up if you have any extra credits laying around. But we will also link down in the description box below some clips to Dr. Katz if you've never experienced it. But yeah, highly recommend it. It's something...
Oh, you know what the music means. Our time is up.
If you have any comments or questions, you can put them in the comment section below. You can find me on a variety of different places on social media. All of those are in the description box below as well. Thank you, Tony, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
See ya.